Here on Script Camp. Today we're going to be listening to your guys' short pitches for new horror scripts that you may have written or may not have yet written. You're going to go through the whole thing, 3 minutes or less, and basically your options are either take us about halfway through the story and then sort of suggest the trajectory towards the ending, or if you have enough time and if you are very efficient, you can take us all the way through to the ending, but the time limit is the same either way. So we will have some prizes that we are announcing today. I'm not sure if we have images for all of these yet, but we have our first prize is going to be a story development session, which is normally $100 value on the websites. It's going to be a thorough analysis of your movie concept with a half-hour one-on-one consultation and work session with me, where I can help you get your movie idea into shape and help you start putting some of the key pieces in place to start outlining that idea. So if you want that, then that is one of our top prizes. We also have script coins. We have prizes for runner-ups, like a mug and a t-shirt, and runner-ups will get 25 script coins each. We may need to take a day or two to review the video from the event just to finish evaluating, so we're not going to give the judgment at the end of class today, but check in within the following days to see if you are one of our winners. But ultimately, this is kind of just a low-stakes, fun event to practice pitching and to practice communicating stories within this very sort of truncated format, because it's very difficult within that limited time frame to go through all the important stuff and to speak very fluently and confidently and to make sure that all your ducks are in a row. So it doesn't have to be perfect. If you need to take a second and restart or something like that, that's all totally fine. But I recommend practicing these pitches a little bit before you do them. Try to time yourself and get the key information down. So it's going to be about like 2 or 3 sentences for the cold open, about 4 sentences for the first act, maybe 8 sentences for the second act, and then maybe 6 or 7 sentences for the third act. That's about all you have time for, so you do have to kind of be very efficient with your words and really make the structure of the story very clear, which can be tough if you haven't written the script. You don't know what exactly would be in it yet. You have to kind of nail down those key points that make it feel like a coherent story, even if you have yet to actually execute it in its entirety. So I'm going to give you some other, talking too fast. I'm going to give you some other pitching tips as well. Just some general guidelines, not really specific to this genre or to any one specific genre, but this is just overall pitching tips in general. Just some suggestions for you. So let me bring up an older slideshow. We've done a couple pitching events and classes on the server before, so I really recommend checking out, if you want to be in events like this, go on YouTube and you can look up the earlier Pitch Fest, like the Christmas Pitch Fest from 2022 with Scott Barkham, or the previous Horror Pitch Fest that we've done. Let me just adjust this window for you so you can see all the text. So the purpose today is to have fun, refine the idea, and practice improving this technique, just because there's not many opportunities to practice what we end up having to do quite a lot in the industry, which is verbally taking someone through the story. That's usually the term we use for it, is taking someone through the story. So if someone asks you to take them through it, what they mean is basically explain to me what happens pretty efficiently so that we can get the major plot points. I know whose story this is, who's the protagonist, what are they up against, what are the fun set pieces in the middle, how does the character develop and struggle and change by the end, and then you should try to, like in sticking the landing, I would try to end on a sort of sentence or two that clarifies how the world or protagonist have changed throughout the story. Be prepared to hear that some parts of this don't work. It's okay to come to this with a silly or less serious idea if you want to just get those fundamentals down. I don't usually recommend pitching a passion project in a workshop session like this. If your pitch was already perfect, though, there's no need to bring it to the workshop, so you should come with the expectation that you will get notes and suggestions on how to make both the story itself. Well, let me put it this way. Often, when Scott and I would do these in the past, these would sort of end up becoming almost like as much a critique on how you deliver the pitch as they are sort of story notes. Like, it may be that the problem isn't exactly how you're presenting it, but it could be the underlying story itself. That may not be the case. It's sort of hard to assess from such a quick version of the story. So just be prepared to hear any amount of feedback or any different types of feedback. These are the materials that you're going to need to have ready to go. So don't post these yet, because it's going to get lost in the chat if you post them all at once. So wait till I tell you to post them before sharing them. But this is what you will need. You will need title and genre. If you don't have a title, it's okay. You can call it Untitled Snake Movie or whatever you want. And then we have comps or clarification of tone if needed, so you can include comps or something like that if you feel that would be really key to understanding what specifically you are going for this movie. And we have logline. So the logline is going to be one simple sentence that expresses, what is this about? There's an adjective protagonist must conflict before stakes, is how this usually ends up sort of looking. And then, so you're going to start with that, title, genre, comps, and logline. And then just wait till I ask a couple questions, potentially. I may not have any questions, but usually there will be at least, a clarifying question or two. And then when you're ready, and we're ready to move on to the next step, I'll say, all right, take it away, or something like that. Go ahead with your pitch. And I will have the stopwatch in hand, meaning that I will wave to you once when you're getting close to the time. So this means you have about 30 seconds left. And I will wave again when you are out of time. We do have to cut you off after 3 minutes. I'll let you finish the sentence that you're on or whatever. But ultimately, you do have to wrap up pretty quick, or I will have to, unfortunately, step in and cut you off. So make sure that you are finishing within a reasonable amount of time. Don't try to cram everything into the end, or else it sort of feels like when you're handwriting a school assignment and you get to the end and you have to make your text really, really small to all fit in the one line. That just feels a little clunky, so try not to do that. Obviously, it's okay if these are not perfect. If it's your first time ever doing this, then it would not be perfect right away. Okay, so hopefully everybody can have that stuff ready, be working on that and getting that together as we prepare to post. We're not posting yet, but get these things ready to go, ready to copy and paste into our chat so that you can do so very quickly. Control-C, copy, Control-V, paste, and have them ready to go so I can go down the list and call on people one at a time. Title and genre, logline. Then when you go into the story, you don't have to go through every single beat. You really have to pick which one you want to do. You have essentially two options. One option is to take us through the story to about the halfway mark, and then say, and then he must blank and blank in order to, or before blank, and kind of sum up the rest, the second half of the movie in about a sentence or two. You don't have to know exactly what the ending would be besides they defeat the bad guys, or you don't need to know much more specifically than that. If you do this style of pitch, this one is going to focus more on the first half and on the premise scenes and of sort of selling the basic core idea. Whereas the more developed pitch is going to still be within that 3-minute time limit, but this is going to usually be for scripts that you've already written or that you just have done a lot of outlining on so far, and that's going to take us through all the way to the ending, and it should feel like we've completed both the internal journey, the characters' internal and external journeys should sort of knit and interweave in that wonderful way that they do in screenwriting so that it feels like a cohesive and complete idea. So the second one is a bit trickier, and if you haven't written the script yet or you're not sure about this, maybe go with the first version first, the sort of half pitch where you take us through the middle and then suggest the rest of the movie. And then after that, I will ask you questions. We'll have discussion and feedback, and anyone in the chat can, of course, also weigh in on their thoughts or questions or opinions. We're not going to take hands raised and people speaking out loud on their opinions on the pitches, but you can say whatever you want in the text chat, which you can find by mousing over the Classroom channel on the left-hand side of the Discord window. You'll find a small white word bubble that says Open Chat. If you click that, then you will open up the voice channel chat on the right-hand side of your window, and you can leave all your questions and comments in there. So, couple things first. If you're new here, this is Script Camp. We're a screenwriting community focused on helping you take your concept from idea to polished script, with lots of free events and classes and workshops like this free workshop today. We have some classes for our supporting members too, which means that you should sign up for a subscription if you're interested in doing things like boot camps, where you'll go entirely from idea to finished draft in 8 weeks, for instance, for our feature boot camp. Or Writer's Lab, which is every Saturday. It's like office hours. You can come with any questions, topics you want to hear about, or up to 5 pages of anything you're working on in order to get feedback. We have a million opportunities for things like readings, peer feedback, script swaps, multiple times per week. So if you're interested in that, you should definitely sign up. Go to scriptcamp.net. You can sign up for our unlimited membership for just $29 a month, or if you buy yearly, then it's only $19 a month. You'll save 40%, and you'll get access to absolutely every single thing we do here, including boot camps, Novel Boot Camp, which is ongoing on our sister server called WordCamp. So you'll get not only Script Camp classes, but every class we do on every Skill Camp server, including servers like our new server Game Camp for game design. We have servers in animation, filmmaking, design, like graphic design, language learning. We've just started adding classes over on our server Lingo Camp. So by signing up for Unlimited, you will get access to all of those, plus an extensive library of every recording of every class we've done, huge discounts off of consultations and proofreads, and ultimately almost 100 hours of live classes and events every month. So definitely sign up if you're interested, if those things sound cool and fun to you. Just a tiny bit about me. I am primarily a horror thriller writer who moved to LA in 2015, got signed in 2017 off of my historical horror thriller script, Peter and the Wolves, and have written on things like Shudder's Creepshow back in 2019. I have done a lot of rewrites on low-budget horror thriller features, usually for writer-directors. And I teach the boot camps, the weekly writer's lab, and many other things around the server. Okay, so a couple tips. So we have to organize the pitch to hold the listener's interest. Let me make sure you can see that text. There we go. We have to hold the listener's interest. So your story should blossom from the most fundamental expression to more granular details. So for instance, today I'm going to give a quick, 3-minute example. I'm going to pitch the movie Arachnophobia from 1990. Now, what's the very core version of this movie? It's a horror movie about spiders. So you have to have just like that simplest expression. Oh, it's a movie about a mummy. Okay, we have just, and in horror, the hook is the threat most of the time. So you have to know what the hook is of your movie. It's the one where a werewolf is a cop. You know what I mean? It has to be as simple as that. So I would recommend trying to have just like that. If somebody asks you at a party, what is your story about? Just have that really, really simple, quick version ready to go first. That's like the smallest possible expression of the story. So the story is like a big box with many sort of concentric, smaller and smaller boxes inside it. So we have to sort of start with the smallest one, and then from there move out to the slightly bigger one, and then the bigger one. And that would be, for instance, we start with just that quick one line. It's a horror movie about spiders. And then we have the log line, which is the one sentence version, slightly bigger. Then we have the slightly longer version, which is the one sheet, perhaps. With slightly bigger version, that's the 3 sheets. We have the slightly bigger version that is the treatment, that's like the 20-page version. And then finally you have the script, that's like the biggest box that contains all the other ones. So instead of trying to dive right in and present, get right into the thick of the details and stuff, it's easier if we start with some version of, this is a horror movie about spiders. Okay, let me take you into the logline. Like, you build out from the smallest to the bigger versions, so we have an idea. It's like you put a label on the box of the DVD first that says Spider Movie. We see that and we know immediately if we're interested or not. Like, I don't think it takes much to know if you'd want to watch a horror movie about spiders or not. We want to always make sure the audience knows what ride they are in line for and what kind of experience they are going to be in for. And you need to put that up front to calibrate the expectations that your reader or listener has at the very beginning. It's helpful to lead with comps or some sort of explanation of the tone if it might drastically affect how we imagine the story. So think, for instance, like, it's a pulpy adventure movie with a tone like The Mummy is a very different experience than, this is a heart-wrenching drama. Like, so definitely if there's a really specific emotional experience you have in mind, lead with that. We want to clearly lay out the story's walls, so that means the time frame, the boundaries, the ticking clock. You don't have to label each section of the story as we get through it. That, to me, it's like, you don't have to start with Act 1, this happens. Midpoint, this happens. You don't have to label them as you go. That sort of feels like in an anime fight scene when the characters are just, like, yelling out the names of their moves. It's like, you can just do the fight, guys. You don't have to tell us, midpoint! Like, you don't have to deploy your moves at us like they're Pokemon that you're choosing. You can just take us through the story, and it should naturally kind of feel like those moments are happening, and we should pretty clearly be able to assess where we are structurally. So you do have to have a pretty strong understanding of structure to effectively take us through a pitch. Don't include background or context that is not super essential. Like, I thought of this when I was with my dad camping in Arizona. Like, it doesn't matter really how you thought of the idea. We don't really care. Like, you're just using up too much of your time if you're giving too much background details on how this came to be or what inspired this or things like this. Don't really worry about those. You have to hook us pretty quick. And then, lastly, don't use character names, except for maybe your protagonist. Like, the protagonist is useful to name for the most part, because we can remember, like, maybe one or possibly two names in a pitch. It's easier if one of your characters is, like, Dracula or something, because that no one's going to forget Dracula, right? So try to limit the number of names that we have to learn and refer to characters instead by their role in the movie. So, I don't know, for instance, you might start by, like, you have a character that's a scientist, so then you might refer to them as the scientist every time. If there's multiple scientists, then you have to be more specific and call them the botanist or something like that, right? So the role, as in like the job the character has, might be a good way to identify them. Their position in a family structure might be a good way to identify them. Him and his sister need to go to the bank and stop the robbers, you know what I mean? So try to think of like shorthand that you can use for the characters where we can keep them straight and that we won't be worrying about, wait, who is that again? It's just easy to get lost in a pitch if you give us too many names to worry about. Focus on the main character. You're not really going to spend that long fleshing out the other characters or suggesting what the side plots or sub-stories are going to be, like the B, C, D stories, whatever it is like that. It's really difficult to pitch an ensemble movie in 3 minutes if you don't have a masterful command of things like structure and character. That would be something you'd have to really work to prepare ahead of time, I think. So mostly focus on just the A story, the protagonist, and his internal and also external journey that should feel like they sort of weave together and all feel very organic, like they've either, they've succeeded or they failed, but regardless, they have addressed their sort of internal need and have reached some new kind of stasis by the end. We started in a place of stasis, and we're going to leave in a new status quo or a new sense of what the normal is. And last, I'll say motivation and urgency. So it should be clear that your main character has to act, that your main character is the one acting. So even if they're not directly involved in a scene, it should be clear what they are doing and how they are advancing their goals and the plot. Try to make this not really feel like an episode of a TV show where it's like, first this thing happens, and also this other thing happens that's unrelated to the first thing, and also this other thing happens. It should really feel like, so then this, so then this, and therefore this. So then and therefore are the words that we should be kind of using to link events together. So we're starting with the cause and we're moving into the effect, and you kind of follow that pattern all throughout. So don't include extraneous information. Try to just be as clear and straightforward as possible. Okay, so I'll check the chat for questions, and I'll take any last text questions before I go into our example today. I'm going to pitch arachnophobia, and then I will open the floor to you guys to do your pitches. Let me check the chat comments and see what we have. So Gabriel asks, can I start by saying, imagine a world where, and then introducing the idea and developing it? I really wouldn't. That feels kind of like cheese. Like, that feels like how people pitch movies in movies. Or that feels like a trailer, like, in a world where androids live amongst humans. But usually you're going to get more mileage out of, we start on a character, and you give us a character that has a problem, and here's how the character goes about trying to solve that problem. So just bring us right into the story. I wouldn't build out the world way too much beforehand unless you have something, like, really quick, to the point, and clear, very pithy, and, like, without any frills on it. So if you have, like, one sentence that explains the world at the beginning, you can, but just be aware that your words and time are almost always better spent on, this character has to do this, and then this, and then this, etc. Question from Luke. If we have an ensemble, is it worth mentioning the others briefly? It's worth mentioning them briefly, and we should understand what they are doing in the orbit of your main character and in relation to your main character. So, like, when your main character does something that affects them, or they do something that affects his A, like the A storyline, we should typically know about that. I wouldn't go into the beats of their stories, though. So don't feel like you have to pitch us 5 movies, each 4 separate characters within that one story. It should feel like one story that is one person's story for the most part, and then help us understand how the ensemble supports and amplifies it. Question from Ed, can we pitch a short? No, today we're pitching features. It doesn't really take 3 minutes to pitch a short. I would say that's almost how long it would take to watch the short, depending on the length. So let's focus on full features today. Question from Dan, does it have to be spooky? This is the horror Halloween pitch fest, so yes, it has to be spooky. We're looking at horror genre stuff only. There can be some other flavors in there if you're doing something like horror comedy. As long as it's still intended to be scary, that's okay. It has to be horror that is intended to be scary, but within that you can have little dabs of other flavors as well. Here's a question. Can my current ending sucks, so it's an ex machina. Can I leave it open? I would, if you're taking us all the way through to the ending, then you shouldn't leave it open. what you should do is the first style that I discussed today, where you take us about to the midpoint and then suggest what happens towards the end in such a way that feels as satisfying as you can make it. But if it doesn't really feel satisfying because the ending is so ambiguous or so out of nowhere, then I feel like you should almost probably not, if you have a different idea that does have a solid ending, like the ending is what brings it home a lot of the time. And by going all the way through to the end, you're sort of suggesting I have a way to stick the landing. So I would suggest either take us halfway and do that technique, or pitch a different idea. But one of those two I think would work well. Any other questions before I take us into our example? Butcher asks, how are you today? I'm good. I'm feeling very spooky. I wore my Nightmare on Elm Street shirt, as you can see, to get into the proper Halloween season. I'm not good at making costumes, but I'm pretty good at finding weird off-brand pale pink designer clothes to wear that have horror icons on them. Okay, so let's get going. I'm going to take us into our example pitch, so I'm just going to bring up an image. I'm just going to demonstrate how I would pitch a movie. You can use what you want from my technique here, but I'm going to be timing myself just to show you an example of what sort of the amount of information that you should be including and how concise that you're trying to make this. Arachnophobia movie. Has anyone seen this? This is a movie I liked a lot as a kid. Definitely terrified me. And there were rumors recently there was going to be a remake. I think it may have died during the strike. I'm not sure. But terrifying. Who isn't afraid of a swarm of killer spiders, right? Okay, so I have my clock ready. I have my poster behind me. So I'll start by saying this is called Arachnophobia from 1990. And ultimately, in terms of tone and comps, I would normally, remember, I have like a logline and stuff for you, so you should have that for your own. Because I didn't write this movie, I don't have the logline ready to go. I will say this is by Don Jacoby and Wesley Strick from 1990, and the tone of this is sort of campy horror comedy with like jokes and sort of a lighter tone, but with that pervasive kind of like Joe Dante, like Gremlin style demented horror attitude to it. So it's like a fun horror comedy is what I would call it. But you know, if you're afraid of spiders, it's obviously absolutely horrifying. Okay, let's get started. I'm going to have my timer ready, and I'll be watching this, and I'm going to do the version where I try to go all the way through the entire story if I can. I prepped this just before class, but obviously this is not like something I have a lot of deep knowledge of, so I'll just do my very best. Where did I put it? Here it is. Okay. So you can have notes for this. You can look at your notes. You can, like, a lot of the time you'll be doing this over the phone or on a Zoom call or something like that. And it's like an open book test in school or whatever, because you can glance at it whenever you need to. But you should try to stay present and in the moment to the best of your ability. And if you find you're taking too long on something, try to like skip ahead a little bit or combine a few moments or things like that. All right, I'm going to take us through the whole thing. Arachnophobia. Here we go. So the cold open of this movie starts in the wilderness of Venezuela, where an entomologist discovers a brand new type of spider, which he believes to be a lost prehistoric species. When it bites his photographer, we see how deadly this species is, because the man dies in a matter of seconds. And when the spider sneaks into his coffin, it gets shipped right back to the US. The spider emerges from the coffin and ends up taking shelter in the barn of a town's new doctor. Our protagonist, Ross, who has just moved his family from San Francisco back to his small coastal California hometown. Ross suffers from arachnophobia as a result of a traumatic childhood experience where a spider crawled up right on his face and left him feeling paralyzed with fear. Since the current town doctor is retiring, Ross is here to take over his position, and he feels he has to prove himself to the skeptical townsfolk who consider him now kind of a big city doctor that has abandoned his roots and lost touch. He has plenty of patience soon enough, though, as the spider in his barn mates with a native spider, and together they produce a swarm of deadly arachnids that begin to attack the townspeople in one sort of hair-raising set piece after another. Through 3 of these attacks, the spiders claim 3 victims in a matter of days, and at each crime scene, Ross attempts to gather clues and decipher the cause of these mysterious deaths. But the townspeople judge him more and more harshly because he's unable to identify the cause of or put a stop to this string of what appear to be just deaths of natural causes. He's always one step behind the spiders. But he starts to suspect spiders when he notices a bite on one of the corpses, so Ross orders the bodies exhumed, and that confirms his suspicions. He contacts the entomologist from the beginning, who comes to the town and explains the spiders have interbred and produced a sort of ant-like colony with a queen in command. He warns them that due to crossbreeding, the next generation of these spiders is going to produce fertile offspring, culminating in the species' next stage of evolution, and soon, their worldwide dispersal. When the hive hatches, it's all over. Most importantly, Ross figures out that the nest is in his barn. The spiders swarm through his home in a series of spine-chilling close calls as they attempt to attack his family before Ross arrives and manages to get his wife and son outside. But in the chaos of the escape, he ends up falling through the floor into the wine cellar, which is the central hive of all the spiders. Ross becomes paralyzed with fear as the queen spider crawls along his chest towards his face, which mirrors his traumatic childhood incident, and he's forced to dig down very deep and use his love for his family and his newfound responsibilities as the town doctor to push himself forward and overcome his phobia, allowing him to fling the queen spider into the fire. Despite being badly burnt, the queen leaps out from the fire just as the egg sac hatches, and Ross nails it out of the air with a nail gun, and it impales the spider to the egg sac and sends the whole thing burning to a crisp. With the queen and the nest destroyed and all the soldier spiders now dying, the spider's threat is over. Ross takes his family back to San Francisco, where they celebrate with a nice glass of champagne, their, grand return home to a place free of spiders, until, in the last seconds, an earthquake hits. The end. Alright, I was at 3:02, I believe. Kind of a fun ending there, isn't it? It's not actually scary how it's presented in the movie. It's sort of just like one last joke that it leaves us on. They're like, phew, we got back home. There's no more spiders here, right? Okay, we're good. Then the ground starts shaking. They're like, oh crap. The end. It's actually a perfect ending. Okay, so that's all the way through. That was the style where you take us from the beginning to the end, following every step of your main character's journey to fully suggest, a coherent internal and external conflict, both of which culminate with your character. Like, this is a very sort of like 90s style high concept writing, where the character ends up overcoming their phobia or fear or whatever by the end. Anyway, so hope that's clear. That's about how much information I would include and about how much you should be ready to prepare. That brought me right up to the 3-minute sort of threshold. I could have done it in 1 minute if I were to omit, take out a bit of the background and details, but I think that 3 minutes is just a good sort of slot to aim for. It basically has all the key information that you would need to track the protagonist's journey and to understand the movie, to say, like, I see it, I get it. Okay. Questions before we start? You can raise a hand and ask, or you can use the text chat. Michelle says, can omit details. So in explaining the plot of a 90-minute movie in 3 minutes, you have to omit a ton of details. So a lot of the challenge of this is figuring out what to leave out, and what is the stuff that you need to kind of gloss over in service of brevity. So, like, for instance, did I go into the other town doctor that has a kind of a rivalry with our main character? No, we didn't really have time for subplots. We don't really have time to flesh out other people in the world. You have to just mostly laser focus on that A story, and allow other things to matter in relation to that. We have a question. Somebody saying, I'm late. What's the situation? Is that a question as to what this event is? This is our Halloween Horror Pitch Fest, where you can pitch a horror movie and win prizes. Okay, if there's no other questions, then we will open the floor. Go ahead and post what you guys have. So I want to see logline genre, title, genre, loglines. You can include comps if you have them. And I'm going to try to get through as many as we can. We go until 8 p.m. Pacific time. Post what you got, and I will give you guys a minute to do that. And check back in a moment. Lots of pitches in the chat, which is great to see. Thank you guys so much for posting all these. I usually go down just in the order that they are posted. Okay, I'm seeing like 7 or 8 of them. I think that we will get started just in the order that we got them, so starting with Gabriel. So I will say everyone should be ready to speak out loud and also answer questions afterwards. Let me bring up the slide that showed our kind of order of operations here. So remember, start with title. Where's my slide? Here it is. So you'll start with title, genre, and logline. Wait for clarifying questions, and then I'll tell you to go ahead into the pitch. All right, I'm going to bring up a document so we can take a look at all of the great entries. Oops, not a folder. I want to make a document. Documents. Here we go. So we'll be starting with Gabriel, and this is a script you have written, if I'm correct, right?
Yeah.
Yes, great. Okay, so maybe you can take us all the way through to the ending in that case.
I kind of tried. So
Okay.
just let me clarify. I have to read the title, the log line, and then start the pitch, right?
Yeah, why don't you just start with this right here? Go ahead.
Okay, so the title is Sarah Blood for a Pint. It's a dark comedy and horror movie. The comps are Evil Dead, City of God, which is a Brazilian movie, and Fright Night. One night, when a poor Brazilian boy starts selling blood online, he discovers his customer is a vampire who got addicted to his blood. To survive, he must team up with his drug dealer friends and defeat the bloodthirsty creature.
Great. I totally see it. Can you make it one sentence? I know it's hard. Sometimes
Yes.
it's not easy to do, but log lines typically, like, it should only be 2 sentences if you absolutely need that much explaining. And this idea is, I think you can do it in one. So try to just combine those 2 together. Usually something like, when inciting incident, an adjective protagonist must conflict before stakes. It doesn't have to be exactly that, but the closer you can get to just one solid sentence, the better. Okay, besides that, I think I totally get it. A poor Brazilian boy selling blood online. He discovers his customer is a vampire who gets addicted to his blood. To survive, he must team up with his drug dealer friends and defeat the bloodthirsty creature. Great, I understand. I'm excited to hear the rest. Are you ready to pitch?
Yes, I think so.
Great. So I'll have the clock. I'll show up and I'll wave when you're getting close, and then I'll wave when you're out of time.
Okay, I think it's gonna be very, very short, but let's go.
Whenever you're ready.
Can I start?
Yep. Go ahead.
Okay. So the cold opening of this movie starts in the past, where we see the Portuguese colonizers arriving for the very first time in Brazil. And during this opening scene, we discover that Pedro Álvares Cabral, the man who colonized Brazil, is a vampire. And after that introduction, we go to Favela da Rocinha, the movie set in the Favela da Rocinha, one of the most dangerous places in Rio de Janeiro, where we follow Ricardo struggling to find a job to help his family, which includes his little sister and his mom, who's addicted to drugs. And due to that, his mom spends all the money she has on drugs. That's why Ricardo needs the money, because her mom doesn't have money to pay the bills or the rent anymore. So after all of this, Ricardo discovers that he can sell his blood online, and he sees a big opportunity on that. And as he starts doing that, his life changes, because now he has money to buy everything, and of course, have money to buy everything his family needs. But when demands intensify and the buyer asks for more, Ricardo has to stop sales due to the health problem he starts to have. But when he stops is when the nightmare starts, because Ricardo discovers that the buyer is a vampire who got addicted to his blood. So after his mom dies due to an overdose, Ricardo tries to use her blood as a way to outsmart the vampire, but it doesn't work. So Ricardo has to team up with the most dangerous drug dealers and criminals from Favela da Rocinha in Rio de Janeiro in order to kill the vampire, create traps, and of course, make sure that Ricardo will survive until the end of the night, his family will be okay, and everybody who lives in the favela will be safe. So, and that's it. I think it's over.
Okay, well, great. All right, you're at 1:30, so you're at half the time. So that was the version where you take us to the middle and then suggest what happens towards the end. So good job with that.
Mhm.
Awesome. Thank you for that. So let me maybe just ask a few questions.
Okay.
So you did a good job focusing on just the main character and not sort of building out the cast too much, but it does make me kind of wonder who actually does he like in the second half of the movie, whom is he really teaming up with? Does he have some kind of relationship to the I'm assuming he's not involved with these drug dealers, right?
No, he's not involved in crime, but as he lives in the favela and the favela is controlled by criminals, they are just acquaintances.
I see. Oh, they're acquaintances. All right.
Yeah.
And so how does he get them to help him do this? Is it just like, well, go ahead. How does he get there? How does he get them to risk their lives to help him?
Okay, so when Mateus, who is the main drug dealer of the area, suspects that the vampire is actually going to kill everyone in the favela and mess up with everything he has built, he decided to help Ricardo in order to save everyone, save everything that he's built in the favela.
Okay, so a good part of the middle of the movie is just your main character trying to convince the drug dealers that the vampire is real?
No, I would say that a big part of the movie it's about he trying to outsmart the vampire.
Trying to outsmart the vampire?
Yeah.
Okay.
Mm-hmm.
It seems like the drug dealers wouldn't really need his help, though. How can he help them at that point?
Well, due to the facilities, because the drug dealers they have a lot of guns and everything, so Ricardo teams up with them just to like make sure they will be able to kill the vampire for real.
Why do they need him?
Ricardo?
Yeah.
As the vampire is addicted to Ricardo's blood, they use Ricardo's as a trap. I forgot the word.
A trap. Yeah, that's great.
As the bait.
That's great. You should mention that in the pitch because that is like more of the crux of how the second half of the movie is going to play out. That makes sense why they would still need him. They decide, okay, we'll help you, and you're going to be the bait. That's like a fun hook for the second half of the movie. I would definitely include that if you're going to explain what the movie is to people. That adds a great conflict. It's a good it just really helps. That fills in a lot of gaps for me. So he teams up with them, and now he's going to lure the vampire into a trap to get not exactly revenge on it, because the vampire wasn't the one that killed his mom, right?
No. His mom died due to overdoses by herself.
Just unrelated. And when does that happen?
In the middle of the movie.
The middle. Okay, that's the midpoint?
Mm-hmm.
Gotcha.
And he decided, okay, I will try to use her blood because we have the same DNA.
Okay, cool. Last question. So, what kind of pressure is the vampire putting on your main character?
Well, that's a good question. But I would say, he doesn't want to kill Ricardo, he wants to kidnap Ricardo because he got addicted to his blood. But in the middle of the movie, we have a scene where the vampire finds his perfect wife. So he needs as much blood as possible to give his new wife to make her to turn into a vampire. So that's why in the middle of the movie, he gets okay, I need a lot of blood right now.
Okay. So, but I'm still not quite gathering. So if the main character doesn't act, then the vampire will do what? Keep sending him emails, or where is the vampire even located? In the same community, or the same state, or the same? In
the same state, but they actually have a delivered point. Ricardo uses his neighbor's house in order to make the vampire thinks that Ricardo lives in another house because Ricardo has been selling blood on Deep Web, so he has to take care of himself. But so every night the vampire goes to that house that he thinks is Ricardo's house to get the blood in the mailbox.
Okay, I see. So yeah, I was not quite getting the sense of urgency, at least in the first half, because it wasn't clear what would happen if your main character doesn't act. Right now it seems like, well, he can just stop selling blood to the guy. Nothing will happen, right? He can't find him. So if, for instance, the vampire is like, well, I'm going to kill people every night unless you reveal yourself, something like that would be helpful as for us to understand why your main character is really feeling the pressure and feeling the need, I have to stop this. I think if you can clarify that part of the script, the vampire has his demands have grown, but as a result of that, how is he going to push the main character into acting? I'm going to kill somebody every night until you give me your location or your blood or something like that, right? So it may be that you have something like that, or maybe you need to. That might just be a story idea that you need to bring out a little more, but more urgency after your main character. Because if your main character is not being motivated by the death of his mom, that's actually the midpoint. Then I would wonder what is motivating him, right? Like if he were to just do nothing, it feels like with the information you gave, I wasn't aware enough of what would happen. So try to layer that in. Maybe you need to write that into the script, or maybe it's just in the information you had time to include. I know this is not easy to give all the relevant info. So let's boil it down to just those two main notes. One, you want to suggest the whole becoming the trap thing in the second half of the movie. Second, in the first half, you want to make sure that we understand the urgency. So the main character has to act with high stakes and a high level of motivation in order for us to be fully invested.
Okay.
All right.
Thank you so
nice
much,
job.
Connor.
Any questions?
Thank you. No.
This wasn't so hard,
It was a
was
real
it?
horror movie. Sorry?
This wasn't so hard. It's only 90 seconds, right? It goes by
I have
very
been
quick.
practicing all day long.
You did great.
It's a real horror movie, like pitching a movie in another language. That's a real horror movie for me.
Oh, the real horror. Yeah, I understand. Well, you did great, so thank you so much.
Thank you.
Yeah, I don't think I could possibly pitch something in another language, so props for that. Awesome. So let's move right through because we have so many to get through. Luke, we have a movie called Jesus Christ! Exclamation point. Are you there, Luke?
Yeah, right
Oh,
here.
there you are. Can you read out what you have here for us?
All right. All the genre comps and everything too.
Yeah.
All right. So the title is Jesus Christ. The genre is a horror comedy. The comps are I Know What You Did Last Summer and Saved, and probably a few other things. And the logline: 4 overachieving students accidentally killed Jesus in a school play crucifixion. But when Christ rises from his tomb as a vengeful killer 3 days later, they must slay him again before he murders them or exposes their crime.
Okay, let me read that again. 4 overachieving students accidentally kill Jesus in a school play crucifixion. I think I'm unclear exactly what that means. They kill the real Jesus?
No, a fictional Jesus. Hence the lowercase h in he. But
okay,
yeah,
that's a good point.
That could be clarified a little bit.
So explain. So they accidentally kill the actor?
Right.
Oh. Okay. So then they accidentally kill the actor portraying Jesus in a I guess we normally school play crucifixion. Is that maybe there's a name for that? They're like the Christmas scene is usually called what is that called? The
Passion play I think would be the proper
is that what it's
name for
called?
that.
So yeah, something like that. And then I'm not sure. I didn't really know people did plays of the crucifixion, but maybe there's a more specific title for it. But when Christ rises from his tomb, yeah. So the first thing is, when you say they killed Jesus in the play, I wasn't clear that this meant the actor. So that just made me not understand the rest of it, where it's like now he's rising from the tomb. You mean the guy they killed? No, you mean the actual Jesus is now rising from his tomb, right?
No, this is the guy they killed.
Oh, that's the guy they killed. But when the actor rises from his tomb.
Right.
Right? Okay. As a vengeful killer 3 days later, okay, I get that. They must slay him again before he murders them or exposes their crime. Or I would think the murdering them would be the more urgent of the two. And just furthermore, the idea that a ghost or a revenant could expose their crimes is just a little confusing in the logline. So I'd probably leave it at the murder. That's the bigger stakes of the situations in any case. Okay, so first of all, yeah, with the logline itself, make sure it's clear that you're referring to the actor. There's no actual Jesus Christ in this story. This is purely about some kids in a school play that accidentally murder one of their peers. And so I see now why you're connecting it to I Know What You Did Last Summer. And then they need to find a way to slay him again. Okay. And the last thing is, who's the main character?
The main character would be Faith, the props gal of the play.
Okay. Interesting. So in this case, you will want to clarify whose story this is. So an adjective protagonist must conflict before stakes. A group of people is just not really a protagonist, just in the same way that like a couple's not a protagonist. So you do have to help us understand whose story this is and what they're up against and how their internal conflict is going to interweave with that external. So just highlight the protagonist in the logline too.
All right.
All right, any questions before we go into the pitch?
I think I had one, but I forgot what it was.
Okay, no problem. Well, whenever you're ready then, I'll start the timer and I'll wave when you're getting close and I'll wave again at 3 minutes.
Okay. Hold on, give me 1 second.
Okay, take your time.
Just need to see you waving at me. Okay, ready.
All right, go ahead.
Okay, so this movie opens in a props department for a stage play, but it's big budget. It's Roman armor and stuff, and we establish Faith. She's setting up for this big Good Friday production of the crucifixion, and she's talking with all her friends and the actor who's playing Jesus. And they're all friends. They're all kind of taunting Jesus about this stunt that he wants to do. This is like a private Christian academy. This is like a big budget place, and it's a boarding school, so they're stuck here for the duration. So basically, on Good Friday, there's the big crucifixion play. Jesus has this plan to actually resurrect 3 days later. He's gonna spend his weekend in prayer and fasting, hidden in the tomb, like Job in Arrested Development or whatever, kind of. But everything goes wrong during this production, and all of these girls basically, Jesus is complaining that the lights are too hot, everything's going wrong, it's painful, he can't breathe, he almost gets electrocuted, everything goes wrong, he almost dies many times until finally the fake spear that's supposed to produce this big fake blood effect is a real spear, and they actually kill him. And they're spending a lot of time covering this thing up. Meanwhile, everybody thinks it's all part of the play. It's like they're praising them for like how great the special effects are. They're big celebrities at the private academy over the weekend, but they're still trying to figure out how to cover this up and make it look like an accident. But 3 days later, when the big Easter play happens and they're all stressing and they have no way to cover it up, the actor actually comes back and he's healed, and he's very different. He has a god complex and he's evil, and he threatens them that he's going to expose what they did. They try to stop him. They track him down to his house and find that he has murdered his parents, and it begins a whole cat and mouse game of murders and basically pursuing Jesus and being pursued by Jesus, and Jesus as a slasher villain through the high school and all of this kind of thing. Let's see, where's my midpoint?
We're at 3 minutes.
Oh, that's 3? Okay.
All right. So they need to. I think I get the rest of it though. So they need to work together, find a way to put him back in the grave in order to survive. Right.
Yep.
Awesome. All right. Thank you so much for that. This is original, and it's basically a funny setup. But I think that some things are standing out to me as big questions just right off the bat. The first question is, how is there any ambiguity about what happened? They stab a guy in the play. He's bleeding. It seems like it's part of the show. He dies on stage.
Well, yeah, but it's part of, the crucifixion has a sequence where Jesus is stabbed after he's dead, and blood and water flow from his side or whatever. Mm-hmm. So the idea is that the audience thinks that it's just part of the play,
Right.
and everyone's just convinced that it's really good special effects from this props master who
Right.
designed it.
But then the actor just disappears? They conceal the corpse? What are they?
They have to. They conspire. The 4 girls conspire to hide the body and everything in the tomb until they can figure out what to do. But they never figure out what to do because the whole time everyone is praising them for how great this play was and everything. There's no before they know it, Sunday morning is there, and they're basically they have to do the play again. So,
wait, but before they know it, but the lead is missing.
The lead has taken his like Job in Arrested Development.
Mm-hmm.
He did like a magic trick where he was in the tomb for 3 days or whatever. That was the gimmick. So
Right.
the actor playing Jesus has set up this gimmick ahead of time that he wants to, spend his weekend in private inside the tomb already.
Oh.
So everybody thinks he's in there, and they have to keep people kind of convinced that he's in there. That's part of the trying the locks sequence. And yeah, sorry, do you have other questions?
Yeah, so I'm a little hung up on that, though. So the main character, or not the main character, sorry, the guy portraying Jesus before the show, he clarified to everybody that after the show, I'm going into hiding for 3 days.
Yeah, prayer and fasting. Like I'm so into this Jesus role. I'm gonna meet God. I'm gonna like spend my weekend away from everybody. I'm just gonna hide in this tomb. I've got my Bible and my snacks, and I'm gonna, don't nobody disturb me. I'm in deep prayer.
Okay, did you mention that in the pitch, or did I just misremember that?
I
or
did,
something?
but
you did.
I kind of glossed over it.
Okay, that seems pretty key to how this is working, but it's sort of
Right.
weird. I mean, it's kind of hard to buy. Like, who would do that? What kind of actor I mean, I could understand maybe somebody in a religious setting would make this almost part of their performance or something like that. But if that's the case, I would mention that and put that up front a little bit earlier in your pitch, because that's just, like, in a story where we're covering up a body, or covering up a murder in some way, I was not understanding, like, wait, he goes off stage, now they find his corpse. How is there any question about what happened? He has a stab wound, a real stab wound in his side. But what you're saying is he goes backstage and then disappears out of the public view, and everybody already knew he was going to do that. So, like, that's just kind of a complicated, like, series
Well,
of...
Weekend at Bernie's him off of the stage.
Okay.
Yeah. And,
I
everybody
can
knew
get that.
Everybody knew he was going to lock his door for the weekend, so to speak.
Okay. Do you need to have that happen? I mean, is there not just a way where he goes off stage, they find the... Or, like, I don't know. I don't have to... I'm not going to diagnose and, like, try to rearrange things for you. But it just feels like that's kind of like... That's a big ask, already.
It is extremely complicated, but it is...
Yeah. It's just a lot of moving pieces to...
I think I can make it work. I think I really could make it work.
Okay, maybe you can, but it does draw questions. It's just like...
Yeah, it does raise a good point.
It requires one of your characters to be very unusual right from the beginning, because actors don't normally do that, right? Actors don't normally hide from the public for days at a time after a show. And if that is something that we have to accept for the story to make sense, then I would just explain around that a little bit more at the beginning, or find a different way for the events to transpire to not require him to do that. Maybe it is just he goes missing for a while. Like, that could potentially work, right? Like, the lead is missing, but then you're going to need to work that into the pitch. Now, like, the characters are starting to fall under scrutiny. That's your friend. You should know where he is. Something like that, and then that leads up to his reemergence. That seems at first like a good thing for them. At first, they're like, look, guys, he's fine. We didn't do anything. He's back. He was clearly not hurt at all. But then, obviously, their responsibility will be to stop the monster as he goes on his sort of killing spree. Okay, so that out of the way, that was just logical questions I had going into it. So he comes back, he wants to expose them for their crimes unless what? They turn themselves in? Why doesn't he just do it?
Just kill them?
Or why doesn't he, if he's come back to expose them, what's stopping him from exposing them?
Well, I mean, it's a point of, they're basically taunting him, well, prove it. Like, you have no wounds. Like, you're alive. Obviously we didn't kill you. So,
Okay.
So it's us versus them. It's like a you have to confess, or anyway.
But then them confessing wouldn't even make any sense if he's alive and he has no wounds, right?
That does raise a good point, but I think I could make it work.
Well, I guess you should have more specific.
A lot of the audience.
Yeah, or just have something more specific in mind. Like if you don't turn yourselves in, he wants them to turn themselves in. He wants them to confess. Maybe he still has. Well, but then again, this is already kind of a problem because it's like the second they do what he's asking them to do, then what will happen? He'll go back and be dead again, or he'll crumble into dust, or he will you can't ask somebody to confess to your murder if you're there. So I don't know if the whole premise works. Wait a minute.
For something more Machiavellian and more in line with the A plot once I figure out what that actually is.
Okay. Yeah, just either I'm thinking maybe he comes back and is just like, you guys will all die now one by one, because the threat of him exposing them doesn't make sense, and just couldn't work for this movie. So I think it has to be I'm coming back to punish you for your sins or whatever, to send you to the hell that you deserve to be in, right? And then go ahead.
The God complex thing, that would be apt for sure.
Yeah, exactly. He feels like I'm going to be the one to punish you appropriately, right? So and then you have to have a reason why he doesn't just kill them right away. It could just be you may be that you have to turn it a bit more into a Terminator style chase story where it's like we have to get away from Jesus, and every major set piece is going to be like, oh god, he found us. You know what I mean? Like that.
That would be great, actually.
That might sort of work, and it does feel very slashery. It kind of has that same sort of vibe. So yeah, I think your villain's plan needs to kind of be a little bit more straightforward. So I would look at those two major logical issues before anything else. First, just how does this concealing and covering up the crime, how are we removing as many moving pieces as we need to get to that happening? And then ultimately, once the villain does show himself, if he has a clear course of action in mind that helps us understand the sort of major set pieces of the movie, then that will help us too. Also, we should have a focus on the main character a little bit more, why. I understand the main character was the one who provided the faulty spear, perhaps, so she's the one that feels like she particularly needs to take responsibility for this, maybe, or something like that. But if you can just center a little more close, bring the main character to the middle of this a little more, and help us understand whose story is this, whose movie is this, that would sort of also just help carry us through it. So I think that's it. Any questions from you?
Not really. I mean, it was a very half-baked idea, and I appreciate you entertaining it. I wish I could have had a little more time to think about this beforehand, but
no problem.
I appreciate it.
Yeah, great job. Thank you so much for sharing. All right. Creative stuff so far. Thank you guys for everyone who has shared. Let's move on to our next one, which is going to be Eden with Loins Ablaze, another horror comedy.
Hello.
Hello. What have you got for us today?
Okay, can you hear me?
Yes, I hear you.
Ah, good. Okay. So, I have a horror comedy called Loins Ablaze. The logline is: when an impulsive pyrokinetic realizes that the personified sin of wrath has become hopelessly infatuated with her, she must find increasingly wacky ways to avoid him. I don't know why it says them, sorry. Avoid him to prevent herself from being caught by Homeland Security and
Did you say end or end? Okay. All right. Thank you for that. Horror comedy Loins Ablaze. Being caught by Homeland Security. Why is she at risk of being caught by Homeland Security? Homeland Security of the U.S.?
Yes.
Why is that a threat?
It is kind of complicated, but this whole thing takes place in the U.S. It starts off in the middle of nowhere in Nevada, but by shenanigans, she sets a whole bunch of places on fire because she's a pyrokinetic and she's also impulsive. And she's trying to get rid of this guy who is pretty much unavoidable by ways of being completely and utterly unkillable. Because he is a sin. He is... I mean, you can singe him to nothing and he will come back. And he's the type of guy that no means yes and yes means try harder.
Okay, but what's my question stands. What has Homeland Security got to do with any of this?
Yes. The problem is that in the middle of the whole shenanigans, she draws attention to herself because as excuse me. I'm sorry, I'm still sick.
You're fine.
Because by way of trying to get rid of this person who is also the sin of wrath, he has this way of bringing wrath to himself. So his like pastime is walking into traffic and making like people mad at each other for, like, you know, you bumped into me and why did you do that, and it's all the reason because he was standing in the way, but the people in the other rows of the cars don't know, so they start arguing and he feeds off the wrath, and she is also very much full of wrath. So that's why he decided that she's his girlfriend and he's going to follow her for all eternity. And I think that the culmination of the story is her calming down and trying to figure out how to just feel the zen and not be so impulsive, because that will purge the wrath from herself. And I think that would be the end of the movie. But in the way of the movie, the whole horror comedy thing is he's trying to get it. I don't know how much safe for work this thing is, but I'm gonna say he's very much trying to get into her private space, and she's very much trying to keep him out of that place. So she's doing the best she can by singeing every part of his person, and he...
Can we pause for a second?
Thanks.
My question was just about Homeland Security. I don't understand the connection to the rest of the story.
Homeland Security, yes, she has apparently set a few what's the word? Police stations ablaze. Because she has been arrested a couple of times and she needed to get out of there. So her best case was just to grab the bars and just melt them and go away. Because that's how she works.
Okay, so you're saying ultimately by the end of the movie, the consequences of the plot escalate to the point where Homeland Security becomes involved because she ends up burning down some police stations along the way?
Yeah.
Okay, that is not clear at all from the logline. It needs to be, like, the logline needs to be self-contained and it needs to make sense on its own. So let's look at it again. An impulsive pyrokinetic realizes that the personified sin of wrath has become hopelessly infatuated with her. She must find increasingly wacky ways to avoid him. I'm with you so far, I understand that. And prevent herself being caught by Homeland Security. That's a development of the story. That is not what you would want to include in the logline. So she wants to find ways to avoid him. How is this horror?
Yeah, the horror part comes in the wacky ways she tries to get rid of him, because it comes to a lot of body horror. Because she can burn him, she can tear him apart, and he still comes back. because he's the embodiment of a sin. He's immortal,
Mm-hmm.
like Deadpool style immortal.
Okay, I understand. All right, so I'll let you go into the pitch in just a second, but those were my questions right off the bat. The stakes were not quite clear to me because I think you maybe made the scope feel too big without explaining it. You gave us the effect without giving us the cause, right? So this is sort of like a stalker horror story,
Yes.
where so in which case you may first of all think of what is actually the inciting incident. Is it her realizing that this guy has become infatuated with her, or is it when this guy starts stalking her? You know what I mean? Like, is the realizing part essential for the cause and effect? And then so
No,
when
she knows.
go ahead.
I think the fact that he starts like actively pursuing her is the problem.
Okay. So is it that wait? Is in that case then is the inciting incident when she realizes her stalker is actually an unkillable supernatural being?
Yeah.
Okay, start with that then. That sounds scarier. So when she realizes that her stalker is an unkillable, immortal personification of wrath, or maybe call him an immortal rage spirit or something like that, just to save words, she must blank before blank. You know, she has to. Saying increasingly wacky makes this sound very, very comedic. So if that is the route that you're going, ultimately that is okay.
That would be the comedy part of it. Yes.
Okay. And then what is the? I guess we're looking for. She has to find ways to avoid him before he. What's his end game? Is it to kidnap her?
I mean, I think his end game is to just for her to declare that she is in fact his girlfriend.
Okay, so he wants her to accept him. I see.
Yes.
But
Yes.
but he's violent if she says no. Right?
He isn't violent, not towards her in any way, and if she is violent towards him, he just accepts that as like, kinky. I like that.
Okay, but if he's not actually violent towards your main character in any way, that does raise some questions as to where the stakes and urgency and motivation are coming from. But maybe I'll just let you go into the pitch and you can clear all that up.
I mean, I feel like you've never been a woman being followed by a guy, but
That's true.
In any way, shape, or form, if a guy follows you for any amount of time, and I don't care how quote unquote sweet he is, you just want him to go away. And when he doesn't take no for an answer, it's just you want to call the police, but you don't have any basis on that. And
Right. Go ahead.
you punch him in the face and he's like, yeah, I like that.
Okay, but this is a horror story, so we need to clarify
Yes.
how this will be scary even in the pitch. Okay, so I'll let you go into the pitch whenever you're ready, and I'll have the timer out.
Pitch. Going.
Okay.
So, we have two characters. Yuka is the girl. Indy is the guy. Yuka is pursuing her own goal in life. She is looking for something. And Indy just happens into her life as a personified sin of wrath who latched on to her because she is full of said sin. And as he latches onto her, he follows her like a lost puppy. And as much as she tries to get rid of him, she can't. And she tries to get rid of him by ways of exerting her wrath against him. And since she's a pyrokinetic, there is a lot of body horror involved because she singes him, she burns him, she tears him apart with numerous bombs, grenades, and stuff because it has been previously part of a group of like a task force, and she has kept some of their gear once she has been let go. Not like let go, like honorably discharged, but unfortunately, on her way, she also gets in trouble because all of her attempts to get rid of Indy, she sets a whole bunch of places on fire. So now there is the law also against her. So she has to figure out how to get Indy off her back and how to get Homeland Security off her back, because she is in fact a dangerous persona, like a higher level mutant type of thing. And I am thinking in my head, I am thinking that since he's the sin of wrath, there have to be multiple sins that exist as well, and there is someone who brought them into this world, and in the end I am thinking that the person who would have brought them into this world would have called him off at some point, and that would be the ex machina, quote unquote, end. And I don't really have a good ending, but I think there could be a lot of wacky hijinks involved in this story. That's it.
Okay, great. So we're right at 3 minutes. Nice timing. So thank you for sharing with us. I have a couple questions and things to ask about, maybe. So,
Sure.
The fact that your main character has fire powers, why is that part of the story?
Because in this story, as much as sins exist, gods exist as well, and so do demigods. And she is a demigod, which is a daughter of a god and a human person.
Okay, it's like a Percy Jackson type world.
Pretty much, yeah.
Okay.
But more gore.
Oh, is there? Okay. It feels like a bunch of ideas smashed into one to me. This, or maybe like a novel, which could support all of this, but for a movie, you're going to have a lot of difficulty getting the audience to buy into two completely separate, very fantastical things. One, you have the personification of sins in the world. That would be enough to carry a horror movie on its own. And then on the other hand, you have the main character has fire powers. Also, she's a demigod. Also, there's other demigods. Also, there's all kinds of magical beings. Do you see how the bigger that this gets, and the more complex that it gets, and the more magic you put into it, the less and less scary it's getting, because it feels like the main character, first of all, has plenty of tools at her disposal to deal with this threat, which, to begin with, is like, you haven't exactly clarified how that threat is escalating, only how the consequences around the main character have escalated. So I kind of want to know, like, how is the villain changing his tactics as the movie goes on? Or if he is not changing his tactics at all, how is he getting closer and closer, pushing your main character to the edge, and she's barely succeeding, barely surviving each of the major sequences and set pieces. So I feel like there's too many ideas in this. High concept horror stories, in terms of movies, have like one piece of magic in them, one magical thing. And the more that you add, the more difficult it gets to, first of all, explain everything to the audience and like world build for the audience. And now you're raising questions about like different types of god people and fairy people and all like the more stuff that you have like that, and the more their brain power is going to having to just understand the scope and scale of what they're looking at, the more that they're often disengaging from the basic scary elements of the story. So I would give that some thought. Like, are there some elements of this you could pull back on and remove and try to make this a little bit simpler?
I guess, or maybe let's pretend that it is a part of a larger film series, and each of the sins gets its own movie.
We can't do that. We can't imagine a cinematic universe that our movie is part of, unfortunately. We have to consider it just entirely on its own, its own self-contained story. I think the idea of being pursued by an unstoppable supernatural creature that's in love with you is pretty scary and good. That, I mean, we see stalker stories and things like this, so we know it works. We know it's frightening. But then all the other supernatural stuff on top of it is diluting your hook. Like, I don't even know what the hook exactly is anymore, because it seems like you have 3 of them. I would focus on your villain. Like, what can the villain do, and what are the limitations, and what are, like, the ways that he gets worse or scarier as the movie goes on. Don't focus as much on your protagonist, like, having magic, growing in magic, using magic. That's, like, all much more in the realm of kind of, like, urban fantasy than it, or, you know, contemporary fantasy than it would be the world of a horror movie. That needs to feel like it has one strong core idea to it. Go ahead.
I mean, in all technicality, he's not the villain. He's just a guy who's trying to get with a girl, and the villain is Homeland Security.
No.
Because...
No, that's a later development of the movie. You said yourself that only comes in like after as the consequences of what your main character is doing. If that guy's not the villain, then who is? Like it doesn't make sense. That guy's the hook of the story.
It's her. She gets herself into trouble because she just cannot communicate with this living sin of wrath. She cannot communicate that the wrath is inside her, and she needs to reconcile that she needs to get calm to get him to stop pursuing her. That's the point.
I could understand
That's
that.
how it ends.
That's how it ends, by her getting calm?
Yes.
Okay.
That's it.
That's very internal, so I kind of need to know what that looks like. Like, does she make a trek to a monastery in the mountains to learn to meditate or something like that? You kind of need to give us the external actions for us to understand what that internal change would be. So go ahead.
Within her, so she needs to understand, okay, I am luring this asshole towards me because I am so angry. I am about to punch every problem in the face, and I need to calm down, and I need to be zen, and that's how he stops following me.
Okay.
Because I will no longer be interesting if I'm not mad at the whole world.
Right. Okay, so that's a good internal goal for your character, and now in a later version of the pitch, you'd want to clarify how, like, what external action is your character taking in order to get that effect, and then, of course, as you move into the third act, it should feel like we're working up to the scariest sequence of all. So I think a little bit more development, this one needs to be baked a little bit more in order to get all those elements down, but I hope that at least gives you some ideas of where to start.
Mm-hmm. Okay.
Thank you so much for sharing. Go ahead.
I have been trying to limit myself to less people in my scripts, so I tried to make a story about 2 people.
Good idea. Yeah, limiting the focus or the number of characters is often a good starting point in a feature. You don't want to have more characters than you need. You want to have just the right number, which, you know, is often going to be 5 or so important people. Anything more than that can get unwieldy.
Okay.
Thank you so much. All right, let's keep it going. These have been great so far, guys. Thank you so much for everyone sharing. It's not easy to just get up and first of all, pitch and do this, and second of all, it just takes a lot out of you, so very much appreciated. Let's keep it going with Michelle, Phone Cleaner. And next we'll do Ed.
Can you hear me?
Yes, I do. Hello.
Hey, how are you doing?
Doing great. Feeling spooky. Excited to hear more pitches. Why don't you read out what you have for us here?
Okay. The Bone Cleaner, genre horror, logline. When a detective investigating a series of missing persons closes in on a serial killer / cannibal, she abducts his daughter, and he must rescue her before she kills the girl and eats her.
All right.
Dexter Bones, format, genre. I mean format, feature,
Feature, got it. Okay. Let me check it one more time. Okay, so a detective investigating a series of missing persons closes in on a serial killer / cannibal. She abducts his daughter, great, and he must rescue her before she kills the girl and eats her. Okay, not bad. Structurally, the logline is working, and I can basically see the movie. It just sort of has what I call shark movie syndrome, where it feels very kind of down the middle, like when she's attacked by a shark, a woman must fight the shark or else be killed by the shark. You know what I mean? It's kind of just like, here's the hero, here's the villain, they're fighting. That's kind of all you've given us, where we could use a little bit more specificity as for, like, what is the hook here? Like, what are we... fans of these movies have seen there's a lot of movies like this, right? There's so many serial killer movies. So you have to help us get excited for this one. So think of what can stand out. What can be unique about this? Go ahead.
Oh, okay. All right. The serial killer cannibal is a CSI agent. So
okay.
She utilizes that ability to be able to, basically take apart the bodies to eat them.
Okay, so maybe his relation, like, if you were to highlight, for instance, when a detective discovers that his coworker is a killer / cannibal, or his workplace crush, or his boss. You see, something. Any number of these things might just make it feel a little more personal for the character. Go ahead.
Actually, about not quite to midpoint. They begin dating. He doesn't realize that she's the killer / cannibal.
Okay, I understand. Yeah. So, but I'm thinking just in terms of the logline. Try to, if you can connect, like, what is their relationship like when he discovers his girlfriend is a killer / cannibal. I think that's kind of what you're saying. When he discovers that his girlfriend is the cannibal he's been tracking, right?
He's actually married, and that's his flaw. So he's cheating on his wife.
Oh.
But yeah, she becomes his girlfriend. Mistress. Yeah, mistress is a yeah. Mm-hmm.
So when he discovers his mistress is the cannibal killer he's been tracking, something like that, just makes it feel more personal, helps us understand the relationship between the people here.
Okay.
She abducts his daughter, and he must rescue her before she kills the girl and eats her. Yeah, we basically understand. Okay, so that's just my ideas there. If you can, the more you can do to make, because it's not that the story doesn't work. It's just that there's a billion of these, and so you have to do a little extra to make it feel unique and personal and specific.
Okay. Well, I guess.
All right.
I guess I didn't write my log line well enough.
That's okay. These things take practice, and they take, a couple different tries, a lot of development. Sometimes people are adjusting their log line all throughout the process of writing the script, so it's no problem at all. Are you ready to go into the pitch?
So am I supposed to start with when someone says, "So what's your movie about?" and you say it's about this?
You can tell me that now if you want. When we go into the pitch itself, you're usually just going to start us right at the beginning and take us through scene by scene. So if you have some kind of primer for the movie, you can give that to us now. Go ahead.
Okay. So the movie's about a detective who's tracking a killer / cannibal.
Great. All right. Thank you for that. Whenever you're ready, take it away, and I'll start the clock.
Okay. All right. I'm ready.
Go ahead.
Okay, so the cold opening is that the killer finds woman and seduces her, takes her back to her place, and kills her, and then takes apart her body and cooks part of her and eats it. Okay, then we see the detective. He is investigating a series of bodies that have been found. Then that's where he meets the serial killer, who is the CSI agent, and they're talking about about the bodies that have been found and trying to get as much data as they can. So what we then see is that the killer is beginning to take more people and kill them and eat them, and the detective is having to investigate these disappearances, and this keeps accelerating, and the killer / cannibal has begun stalking him because she's figured out that he's on the case, and she quote unquote runs into him, at dinner and sees the wife and the daughter, and then calls him up under a ruse to say, "Hey, how are things going?" And they meet for drinks professionally. They talk about things. She basically seduces him. He's willing, and they go to bed. And this is how their affair begins. In the meantime, she is killing more people and eating them, and he's beginning to investigate more and more of these disappearances. The people disappear. No bodies are being found. About the midpoint, she manages to take one of these people alive. She takes him back to Mexico, just, I guess, a change of scenery where she needs to kill. And so she kills the man, eats him. You get the idea. And then he's beginning to suspect that maybe she has something to do with this. And she manages to take a man from her gym, and he finds that the license plate matches, and she comes up with a believable story. Then towards the end, she manages to stalk the daughter and convinces the daughter to come back with her to her lab, and that's where she has the daughter, and she's going to kill the daughter for the, just because of power. She doesn't expect to get away with it. It's just for power. And then she's going to eat him, and, she's going to get arrested. She knows that. So she gets arrested. She's shot.
We're time here, okay. But you can finish your sentence. So what happens at the very end?
Well, she goes to trial, and we see her taken away, and she's going to be executed.
Oh, so good guys just win. We move on, to fight the next battle.
The good guy. Yeah, the good guys win. I mean, I did want to have her get away with it, but I decided no, maybe she shouldn't get away with it.
Okay. So first of all, thank you for sharing, and nice job fitting that into the time frame.
Okay.
So questions and comments. First of all, just on structure, your logline suggests that the abduction of the daughter happens much earlier in the movie than you're saying actually it does in the script itself. And it feels like your main character is not really motivated enough for most of this, or the pressure doesn't feel strong enough on him in at least the first half of the movie, especially through that really key premise sequence from pages 25 to 50. It sounds like your main character doesn't have enough urgency. I would recommend taking this idea that she steals his daughter and putting that much earlier, and maybe at the midpoint, or maybe even at the act break, or at the break into two, just to make sure that your main character is feeling the intensity and feeling that I need to solve. If I don't solve this, my child will die. Is a really strong motivation. Think of a movie like Prisoners, or something like that, right? Where it's like.
About that one, but okay.
So think of how at least that's your logline led me to believe that would be happening earlier. Whereas when you describe the script, it sounds like that happens towards the end. So normally you wouldn't include in the logline something that only happens towards the very end. It's like you are typically taking us to about the midpoint, and then you say he must blank before blank, and the blank is going to be, the worst thing that could possibly happen. But anyway, so yeah, the logline is working. To me, the logline structurally makes a little more sense than the script itself. The other thing is that the ending feels sort of soft and easy. If you look at other movies like this, they don't have simple, clear, we beat the bad guy endings. They have haunting, difficult endings. Think of something like Silence of the Lambs. Hannibal Lecter gets free, and he calls Clarice to say, I've gained a lot of respect for you. Don't ever come for me, or else I'll come for you. Click, and then he goes off to find his next victim. That's the end of one of the most famous serial killer movies of all time. Or think of Seven, where at the end of Seven, all of that, I don't have to rehash it or spoil it. I assume you've seen a few of these, but it's not just a simple "we beat the bad guy" ending, is it? It's sort of like the bad guy almost won in a certain way, but the main characters, even though he won, we're gonna keep fighting, and we're gonna keep persevering and trying to beat. Fight off this darkness, even though it seems like there's no light left, right? So this very bleak and haunting ending usually fits this sort of story better, whereas if it feels like, well, we got him, all right, move on to the next one, that feels a little like a police procedural, like an episode of Law & Order, and it doesn't really feel as haunting. It doesn't stick with the viewer as much. So I would look at your ending and try to ask yourself, how can I have something that will make the viewer, afraid to walk to the bathroom at night when they we want them to you want them to be checking the car and when they leave the theater and driving home and being nervous and unsettled and scared. If it feels like everything wraps up with a bow and good defeated evil, then it's sort of well, okay, I'm not that scared ultimately. The good guys clearly have got this covered. So those are just go ahead.
Originally I wanted her to escape, and and then I don't, and then you wonder, it's oh no, you're afraid to walk to the bathroom, you're afraid to go to out to your car at night, because somebody like this is doing this in real life. So maybe so then I'm not too sure how to restructure my log line then. If when a detective discovers that his mistress is a cannibal killer that he's been tracking, he must solve the crime before she kills again.
Well, so my suggestion would be to use his kid being kidnapped and to move that earlier into the movie. So if you put that way earlier, that motivates your character a lot more throughout the majority. The second act should be where that happens and he's responding to that and he's psychologically suffering as a result of that, and he is being pushed to the very edge. I think that we need to see that happen earlier.
Okay, but being a detective, he's not motivated enough to solve the crime?
No, that's just someone doing their job. In a movie, we typically need a little more than just, you're the cop, so you have to solve the crime. You know what I mean? It helps to have that bit more of a personal connection in order to motivate him properly. Otherwise, it's just any case we could just make a movie of because a cop solved a crime, right? But we choose the movie stories about the ones that are more personal or the ones that are more kind of urgent in some way, or at least the ones that are true stories. There's a lot of true story killer movies too, obviously. Anyway, so that's my big notes for you, my big suggestions. Think of motivation and urgency for the main character, and think of how you can really nail the ending and have it be something creepy and memorable.
Okay, so maybe she gets away with it,
Maybe.
She gets away,
Sure, that could work.
Okay, well, I'll consider.
Then the trick becomes, how do you make that satisfying, right? How do I make that just as satisfying for the audience as defeating the killer? So you have to think of what is option C, right? Option A is he beats her. Option B is she beats him. What's the third thing? What's the fourth option? Open the possibilities a little bit and think of what else could happen.
They run off to South America together?
Yeah, they start an Airbnb. You'll have to think of it. We can't decide that right now, but I hope that gives you some good food for thought and some things to think about moving ahead.
Yeah. Well, okay, so just to recap, you're saying move the abduction of the daughter into the break into two, right?
Yes.
Okay. All right. Well, that's not a bad idea. I'm glad to say it's not a bad idea. it is a good idea. So I don't know, why didn't I think about that? That way you say it, it's that makes so much more sense. So
I'm sure you'll find a way to make it work. Thank you. Yeah, no worries. Thanks a lot, Michelle.
And happy Halloween.
Yes, happy spooky season to you too.
Thank you.
Let's keep it going with Ed, a noir horror.
All right. Sorry, can you hear me?
I hear you fine. Yep, go ahead.
All right, so it's a noir horror. The tone is, it starts off as a noir mystery similar to Chinatown. Then it ends as a psychological horror thriller similar to Jacob's Ladder. The title is Snake Eyes. The logline is hired by a mobster. Private investigator Wallace must spy on his boss's wife, only to find her to have an affair with someone that looks just like him.
All right, thanks for that. So wait, can I ask some questions to begin with before you expand on this?
Sure.
Or did you have more you wanted to say?
Oh, that's it.
Okay, great. So, couple questions. Hired by a mobster, P.I. Wallace must spy on his boss's wife. Whose boss's wife? The mobster's boss's wife or his own boss's wife?
Sorry, I didn't make it clear, but the Wallace works for a mobster. So it's
how is he a PI if he works for a mobster?
Well,
You're saying, go ahead.
He just works for gangsters. He's a bad private investigator. He's not.
Well, he's not even private if he's working for people, right? I mean, are you saying he's a private investigator who is often contracted by mobsters, or he works for them all the time?
He works for this one mobster all the time.
He does. Okay, so, he's not a PI then. He's a mobster himself. He's a criminal himself, right? Or he's an ex-PI?
No, he is a detective. Like, yeah, he's a detective. But the mobster hires him. He doesn't. The mobster wouldn't hire a professional PI who works for the cops.
Well, PI wouldn't work for the cops. The P means private. So there's a police detective.
Sorry, my bad.
Yeah, and then there's the PI, which is the private one. So and the mobster routinely hires him to do what? To do crime or to investigate crime?
To investigate anything, not just crime, but just anything. And he hires him to spy on his own wife.
I see. Okay. So I would maybe consider retuning a little bit just how you explain who the main character is and what his role is. Because if he's a private investigator who's been hired by a criminal but he doesn't know it, that's a different story than or your main character is already a criminal, or all these things like this. It just affects how we imagine the story. So try to think carefully about how you explain who your main character is. We don't need a name in the logline, so you'd want to describe the character, because we're not going to remember the name to begin with. And then beyond that, you have an opportunity to give us an adjective that tells us, who is this person? Is he a burnt out private eye, like most of them seem to be? Or is he a very optimistic private eye? Is he, does he have 3 arms? Like, what makes the character unique? What motivates them? What's a limitation they have? What's something they're struggling with? In this kind of movie all the time, what do we see? The alcoholic detective. Don't we see that a million times? The alcoholic detective must conquer his demons as he takes down the bootleggers. So describe the main character just a little bit rather than giving us a name, because we're just not going to remember the name. And then just in terms of the pronouns, so you're referring to spy on the mobster's boss's wife. Must spy on his boss's wife. The mobster's boss's wife. Okay. Only to find her having an affair with someone who looks just like him. Like who? Like the detective or like the mobster?
Like the detective.
Like the detective. Okay. Find her having an affair.
And also...
Sorry,
okay. I would change, I guess, instead of boss's wife, it would just be on the mobster's wife.
Oh, his own wife?
Yes.
So there's not a boss here in the mix at all? Okay.
No.
Okay, yeah, look at the order of the just like subject and verb agreement here, just to make sure that everything is still working. So he finds that she's having an affair with someone that looks like him, and now he must, what?
So that's the dilemma. He doesn't know what to do. So the PI, he works for this mobster. He wants out of this criminal lifestyle, and he feels regret for all the years he worked with them.
Pause for 1 second. Pause. I'm sorry to cut you off. I hate when people do that, but I will just say, so this isn't just for you either. This is for everybody at all. Simple questions should have simple answers. A 1-sentence question of about 5 words should have an answer of a 1 sentence about 5 words. You don't have to go into the story much deeper. We're about to do that in just a moment. So for the purposes of just looking at the logline, let's try to answer the question. He must blank. So he must what? He has to escape? Or is she trying to kill him? What's the problem even? Like, it's weird. It's certainly weird. But what's the problem that needs to be solved?
The problem is that the private investigator doesn't know what to do.
No, that's not the problem. That's a result of not knowing what to do. Or that's a result of having a problem, I should say. So once you have a problem, you wonder how to solve it, right? But the only problem is that something unusual has happened. But it isn't actually requiring a response from him, is it?
So it is. I guess the problem is that he fears murder. He fears that someone will kill him because this lover looks exactly like him.
Yeah, no, that makes sense. Wait. So you're saying he's afraid the mobsters will look into the murder and see him and then come for him and murder him because they think that he's the one doing it. That's interesting. Is that do I have that right?
Yes.
I do. Okay. So you got to spell that out in the logline, because like it feels like you're taking us up to like the inciting incident, and you have to be like, okay, start with the inciting incident, and then take us through so we understand what is the fun of the middle of the movie. Like, and then he must struggle to prove his innocence before he gets executed, something like that, right? Like, and then he must kill the 3 leaders of the cult before they unleash an unholy plague on the world. Like, your character must do blank before blank is a really, like, kind of the most important part of the logline, and the setup is cool. I'm intrigued by the basics of what you have going on here, but you've only brought us up to the point where something weird's going on, not to the point where this demands a response from the character, who then takes this tactic towards solving the problem. So the logline feels like kind of half done, but that's okay. I'm still excited to hear the pitch, and maybe all those issues will become very clear when you go into it. But that's just my first read on the logline itself. So I would look at those things, try to take us a little bit further along in the story, and help us understand when this happens, he must then do blank or else blank. That's like really key.
Okay.
Makes sense?
So I don't have. That makes sense. I need to rework on the logline.
No worries.
I don't have a cold opening yet, but I can go after that cold opening. We get introduced to our character, the PI. He works for the mob. He wants out of the gangster lifestyle, and he feels deep regret and trauma after working for so long. He's seen murders, and he kind of wants out. His boss hires him again to spy on his wife. His wife is leaving to California to go to a funeral. Her family doesn't approve of the mobster, so he has to kind of, not follow her. And he says, hey, follow her, spy on her. I want to make sure she's faithful to me. So he goes on this mission to go there. As he goes along, he spies on her, and eventually he finds out that she goes on a date with another man. He spies on her for a bit, and then eventually he sees the face of the man. He starts taking photos, and he realizes that this man looks exactly like him. And he even kind of has similar clothing. And he sees that, he takes pictures, and after a while he looks at these photos and he thinks, I'm not going to tell my boss. I can't tell my boss. This is a big can of worms that can kill me. So he decides instead to try to meet this lover, try to convince him to leave state, so then the PI himself can actually somehow leave this criminal life. So he thinks of a plan to fake his own death and tries to convince this lover to kind of help him on his journey to leave this criminal lifestyle. And doing so, what happens is eventually this mobster, he has to lie to this mobster, and the mobster gets suspicious. He sends some people who work for him to California to kind of check up on this PI, and it kind of transitions to more horror, where this main character doesn't know about this twin, and he starts suspecting that this twin is not real. He starts thinking that this twin could be, maybe an illusion or something, where it's like psychologically he thinks this is not the same person. And I guess towards the end we figure out that these characters, what happens is this main character has a different personality, who is the personality of the lovers, and this lover personality actually fell in love with the mobster's wife, and at the very end of the movie, a different character gets shot as he fakes his own death. As the main character fakes his own death, there's someone else who replaces his role as a lover.
Someone else replaces his role as lover? What does that mean?
He tries to frame someone else as a lover.
As the lover of this mobster's wife. Okay. Nice job. So that brought us in just over 3 minutes. This is unique and it has a nice kind of David Lynch sort of vibe to it, which I'm into, or maybe even like a sort of a Verhoeven stalker thriller kind of feel to it. But I ultimately like the basics you have here. You lost me a little bit after the break into 2, though. So the main character, I can totally see the scene. He's taking pictures. He realizes, holy crap, that's me over there. But then from there, for like the middle portion of the movie, I kind of lost track of what your main character was doing or what the villain was doing. So this double guy, what is he actually up to? Is he doing something sinister, or is he just kind of like living his own life? Go ahead.
Double guy, yeah, I guess I haven't thought of that. The double guy, I wanted to just be an innocent person, like not really, we don't really know much about him, we don't spend a lot of screen time on him. And it's mainly, the main character tries to convince this lover guy to work with them so they can both make their debts and kind of be free from whatever. So the lover can run off with the wife, and they can kind of, be just kind of separate themselves from this mobster, and this detective can fake his death so he can also live a different life.
Wait, so he confronts this doppelganger, right?
Yes, he does. And we need, there's got to be some way to hint that it's not real, or that this doppelganger isn't a real person.
What does that mean? Like, how can he not? What do you mean he's not a real person?
So the twist is that this doppelganger is not actually a twin. There's no physical twin, and instead this main character has a different personality, a split personality.
Right, I got that.
The lover, yeah.
But does that mean that actually... Wait, so I'm sorry. You mean then in that case, then it's like Fight Club style, where we
Correct.
just like everything he's been seeing has been stuff that he has in fact been doing the whole time. Right?
Yes. So it's,
yes.
Yeah. It's yeah.
Okay. So it turns out he's the one that's having the affair with the mobster's wife.
Correct.
Okay. And so I'm still struggling to understand what the premise scenes are exactly, but it does I more or less get it. I'm just kind of, I can see the beginning and the end, but the middle feels murky to me, and the middle should definitely not feel murky. So as far as I can tell, the only escalation is coming from, there's bad guys coming to kill you now because they think that you might be the one having the affair. Is that right? That's the only threat?
Yeah, that's really the only threat.
That's the only threat. But what about the whole kind of like Jacob's Ladder element of this? Where's the horror?
The horror is, that has to be kind of towards the end of, we have to have kind of, I guess, sorry, I didn't think of that. I guess I kind of wanted it to be like more psychological, where towards the end, once we realize it's the same person, we get kind of hints that there's kind of delusions in this main character's head, or the main character is unstable in some way. But kind of from the first half, the only real threat is this mobster character.
Can't it be the doubles now trying to kill me? Like, that's such a, like, I mean,
yeah,
I could see maybe why that, like, that would just, that just feels simple to me. I'm just looking for the simple answer here. That may really not work with what you intended, but in that case, we need a bigger threat, a more present threat. Usually in horror, the hook is the threat of the movie. It feels like the doppelganger should be more of a danger. Otherwise, it's like, the doppelganger is just a plot point in what is otherwise essentially a crime story. Right? It doesn't feel like your main character is actually afraid throughout the movie. Well, he's afraid for his life just in terms of, I'm being tracked by gangsters. But, like, it doesn't feel like the audience would be, like, having the emotional experience of a horror story with this one. Not unless you make the doppelganger more sinister in some way, which would be my suggestion. I don't know that it would work, but it feels like...
It's a good suggestion.
That's
a great suggestion, for sure.
Maybe the doppelganger sort of trying to replace him, right? Like, that's... Even no matter what the twist ends up being, that kind of is hooky, and that kind of does, draw a lot of interest, especially in the middle of the movie, where it's like, what is the movie? The movie is a movie about a guy a detective whose doppelganger is trying to kill him, right? So that and then all the gangster stuff, that's just escalation for later, but that's not like the focal point of the conflict. So you might just want to think about that. It just makes for a simpler, easier pitch to me.
Yeah, I understand.
Okay,
that would make it better for sure.
Any questions on this one?
No. That's what I have. I have to flesh out and make it more simple to understand, like, just for anyone else to read. But
right.
okay, I like that point of having the doppelganger actually be a bigger threat to the detective. It's
Yeah.
more simple. It makes more sense. Yeah.
I mean, he needs something to do. I mean, if you give him more interesting stuff to do, it makes for a better actor bait if you're like, not only will you have one awesome role, you'll have two awesome roles. But if it's like you'll have one awesome role and then, kind of an okay other one, they're just less likely to be into it. They should be intrigued by the possibility of playing two very different characters.
Okay.
Thank you so much for sharing.
Thank you.
We have just 5 minutes left. I will take one more if we can. We have a comment from YouTube. Thank you, Nacho. Something about the title. I'm not sure who that is referring to at this point, but thank you for commenting and watching along. Elm on YouTube. I do want to ask if Taylor, was that the next one? Let me scroll way up. We have time. Taylor, do you think you can do yours in 5 minutes or less? Well, that's well within the time frame, isn't it? Is he still in the server? Or still in the room? No. No, he's left the room. That is too bad. Well, Dan the Man, do you think you can pitch your movie in a short time?
Yes, I'm here. Hello, sorry.
Hello. All right, we've got an untitled movie. It's going great. Why don't you read out what you have for us here?
Okay, so this movie is called The Unknown. The genre is horror, and the log line is three filmmakers students get a tip that could jumpstart their careers but cost them their lives when they're caught in a war between a witch and Bigfoot.
Oh, witch and Bigfoot. All right.
Yes,
let me move this down just a little bit. Three filmmaker students get a tip that could jumpstart their careers but cost them their lives when they're caught in a war between a witch and Bigfoot. It's interesting. It sounds unique and a little bit like a kind of a middle grade fantasy book more than a adult horror movie, but that's okay. Maybe the tone. You do list Cabin in the Woods as one of your comps, so maybe it's a bit of a sillier tone. Is that right?
It's something like that. Yeah.
Okay. So a couple things about the logline. Specify a protagonist. So 3 students are not a protagonist. We need to know an adjective protagonist. So spell out whose story is this? Who is this actually about? You'll want to avoid vague language. They get a tip that could jumpstart their careers but cost them their lives. So don't really spend your words telling us things that could maybe happen. You need to sort of just tell us what does happen and be a little bit more definite. When they're caught in a war between a witch and Bigfoot. I'm not exactly sure what that means or looks like. I think you'll just need to be more specific here. So if the inciting incident is that they get a tip, that feels like you're maybe starting the story a little early, or starting the logline a little early. It might be a little bit more like, when a shy filmmaker and her 2 best friends discovered that their cabin is actually a witch's house, they now must blank and blank. Do you see how that's just sort of a little bit more concrete and specific? It feels like you're holding a lot back, which it is definitely something you do see on like a TV guide or like the back of a book or the back of a DVD. They do look like this sometimes. But for a log line, you need to give away a little more and spoil a little bit more and tell us like, how does that happen? And now your character must blank before blank, just like in those really simple mathematical terms. So I hope that helps on just the log line itself, but I'm excited to hear about what this war between the witch and Bigfoot has or involves. Yeah. So whenever you're ready, take us away.
Yes, sir. Thank you. All right. So our cold open starts with Adam and Eve walking in an open field being followed by a snake. In the present day, our protagonists, Andrew, Brent, and Miriam, are students at the Nashville Film Institute and have one last major assignment before they graduate and make a documentary about nature and how humanity can fix the damage. They receive a tip in the mountains of Gatlinburg, Tennessee about a strange creature that only comes out at night. Around the midway point, they set up camp in the mountains to try and catch the creature. They take pickup shots of the area and then return to find their camp has been destroyed by human-sized moths. There, they encounter Bigfoot and get separated. Andrew encounters a witch who offers to help until Bigfoot arrives and fights her. Andrew runs away while the witch and Bigfoot fight around him. He eventually escapes, reunites with Miriam and Brent. As they try to find their way back home, they come across the witch's lair and discover markings of a man, woman, God, and the snake and what happened to them. They find the fangs of the snake and use them to turn Bigfoot and the witch back into Adam and Eve. Adam and Eve are regular citizens, and Andrew, Brent, and Miriam's documentary explaining how they are protecting the environment ends.
All right. Wow, you pulled that in under a minute. That was quick. So this is unique. I did not expect the witch and Bigfoot to be Adam and Eve. Good lord. So there's some novelty here at the very least. I would love to see some of these things happen on screen. Who's the protagonist is my question. Which of the main was it Andrew? Was that who you said was the main character?
Yes, sir.
Okay.
Andrew, yep.
So we need to sort of take a little more time in a pitch and build out, like, the main character is missing this from his life or has this goal. And then, like, when we go into the second act, it's like, now your character is going to attempt to pursue this goal in this way. So I think you had a nice beginning. Is this found footage?
It's a mix. So that's why I put Cabin in the Woods meets Paranormal Activity, because we're going to cross between the camera's POV and the characters.
Oh, okay. All right. So it has found footage elements. That we've seen that happen sometimes before. That can work. So it starts a little like Blair Witch then in that case, right? So they go into the woods to make a documentary about the monster out there. But then it turns out that the monster is sort of in a conflict with this witch that they then need to sort of help them. Is that right?
Yes.
Okay. So I would think about phrasing the logline a little bit more like this. When an adjective protagonist takes his friends out to the woods to blank and blank, and the blank and blank are going to clarify, he's going to make the movie to impress his dad, or he's going to make the movie to get into the college of his dreams, just you want to kind of explain why it's important in that first clause, the first half of the sentence. And they, or maybe you'll even want to start it by something like, when a documentary filmmaking trip is interrupted by a Bigfoot attack, a blank filmmaker must enlist the help of the local witch to stop him. Because it sounds like that's kind of the hook of the movie. It's not just we get involved in a war, it's, holy crap, we're being attacked by a monster, now the only one that can save us is a witch.
So there is, I had like less than 3 minutes. There's a lot that I did leave out, but the witch actually is the one that gives the tip to Andrew about the thing. And when she encounters him, she's like, "Oh dear boy, you don't remember me?" She basically reveals that to him. So, and then the fight happens. So, but yeah, totally see your point about making, because the log line is supposed to have the protagonist, the antagonist, the protagonist's goals, and the fourth thing that I'm forgetting. But yeah,
like the tactic they have to use, or they must blank before blank. So I would look at that as like, what is the specific course of action that the character will take to try to solve the problem? In this case, the problem being there's a Bigfoot that's going to eat me and all my friends unless I find a way to stop it, right?
Yes.
Okay. So interesting basics setup for the story. I would just try to refine the information that you reveal a little bit like that, so that it feels a little more fleshed out and we understand whose story this is. And also just kind of like the hook of the movie becomes a little clearer.
Gosh.
Any questions?
Do we have more time?
No, this event. This ends at 8, so we're actually totally done. Yeah,
well,
but we have many
Connor,
other. Yes. Sorry, go ahead.
Hey, I would love to come back and chop it up with you more. This was great. Yeah, thanks.
No problem. We do like tons of workshops, events, classes. We have a new feature boot camp that's starting up soon that has a free first class, so you can come to that if you want. Plenty of stuff on the server, plenty of ways to swap scripts and get feedback and all kinds of stuff.
Nice. Yeah, no, definitely. I know I have one on Sunday for the sci-fi Sunday's table read. I'll be on that one.
Great. Awesome. Thanks so much, Dan.
Thanks, Connor. Appreciate it.
So we are out of time. And I've gotten through as many as I could. We're over our 8 o'clock end point at this stage. So I will just say thank you so much, everybody who entered in the Pitch Fest today. We're looking forward to seeing you here more soon for our other many great classes, workshops, and events. Maybe I'll just leave you on the upcoming list. Or maybe we can put that in the chat, actually, because I don't actually have that prepped behind me at the moment. But we are starting the new session of Feature Boot Camp soon. I think it is next week. I'm going to confirm on the dates for you guys, but I will just say you can always check the Events tab in the top left-hand corner of the Discord window to see everything else that we have coming up. So you can see all the table reads, all the workshops, labs, and classes. We're finishing up week 7 of our current Feature Boot Camp on Sunday. We have 1 week left of that, and then afterwards the new session starts. So very soon you'll be able to join us for new sessions of our Write a Movie in 8 Weeks program. Thank you so much, everybody, for coming out. We'll have winners announced in tomorrow or the next day, probably, but you can feel free to watch this back on YouTube in the meantime. Everybody have a great rest of your night and a great spooky weekend.